the Gardenview Horticultural Park in Strongsville, Ohio. We are working out on the grounds and cannot be reached by phone during the day unless you leave your name and number so we can call you back when we come in for a cup of coffee. Please start with your phone number, starting with the area code, then your name and a brief message. You will have 30 seconds.
And people assume that all you need to do is go into a field of weeds and take a package of seed and fling it up in the air, and it instantly turns into a fabulous garden that requires no care, no expense, no nothing. It's just there all by itself. I mean, Jesus put it there. Jesus will take care of it. That's all that they have no comprehension of the work and effort and expense and everything else that goes into it. How were you ever so lucky to find such a nice place with all of these nice plants growing wild all over it? I'd like to find that kind of a place. If I had a baseball bat, I would have put her out of her misery right then. She didn't hear a damn word that I said. Nothing. Prime commercial land. If somebody offered me $1 billion for it, the answer would be no. I have everything in the world here that I don't have any money, but I have everything in the world that I want.
You know, I read about people like you, but
There aren't any people like me. I'm a unique nut.
Oh.
Yeah, I had a minister come out one Sunday, and he started to give me this spiel, and I said, you know, my relationship with the Almighty is very personal and very direct, and I don't need anybody to intercede for me. And his mouth fell open, and he turned around and walked away. Well, people are always telling me, I wish I could give you $1 million, but I don't have $1 million, so I won't give you anything. That infuriates the hell out of me, you know, because the thing that I have adopted the philosophy that if the people of the northern Ohio area do not appreciate it enough to support it financially, they do not deserve to have it. And they will not have it if they won't support it financially.
And there are those who are just waiting for Henry Ross to die.
So they can bulldoze it out and make money on it. Put in a gas station or a brothel or something like that that'll pay taxes.
I started Gardenview in 1949, so next year, 1999, will be our 50th year. The basic purpose of Gardenview is to be, number one, a magnificent oasis, a series of gardens of the kind that you have in England and the kind you have in France and Germany and other countries, of which there are very, very few in this country. And of course, the side effect is that it gives people ideas for things they can do in their own gardens. Every once in a while you get a green shoot. It keeps reverting and you have to keep cutting that green out or it'll grow much faster and choke out the variegation and you'll end up with a green plant. That's true of all variegated plants, not just this one. Most people in this country, until recently, wanted nothing to do with variegated plants. And I really think the main reason for that is for generations, the botanists have been saying that variegated plants are all sick, they're all diseased, they've all got a virus, and anything that shows up variegated should immediately be burned and destroyed. And nothing could be further from the truth. The biggest problem that you have with variegated plants is holding onto the variegation, because invariably they keep trying to revert back to plain green, and you have to keep constantly ripping out the green portions in order to maintain the variegated portion. So there's no danger of the variegated spreading to things that are not variegated. It has to be removed, because if you don't remove it, it's going to grow so much faster than the variegated that in no time at all you're going to have a totally green plant. Every bit of this green has to be removed. Some revert more quickly than others, but there are very, very few variegated plants that don't have any reversion. Most of them are always trying to revert back to plain green. And that's the biggest problem you have with variegated plants, keeping them variegated, and this is the only way to do it, by removing all of the green. When you look for an unusual plant, there's lots of things that have taken me 20, 30, 40 years to find. And once you get it, it really gives you a sense of accomplishment, particularly if it lives. If it doesn't live, it's not so much of a sense of accomplishment. And the more you get into these unusual things that nobody else has got, the more you enjoy them and the deeper you want to get into it. I mean, it's just it's an obsession, it's an addiction. Well, I've been gardening all of my life. I started when I was about 8 years old. I would read about the magnificent gardens in England particularly, and there was nothing like that in this country. And I had hoped that someday I might either see a garden like that or have a garden like that. And of course, when I got out of the Army, I had the opportunity to go to college with Uncle Sam paying for it, so I went to Ohio State. And the last year that I was there, I was coming home for the weekend one time to visit my parents. And I happened to come by here, and there was a for sale sign on the property. Now you must remember this was the middle of winter and it was covered with snow. So I came back the next day and looked at it, and I liked the shape of the property and the location, so I borrowed the money and I bought it. And spring came and the snow melted and the whole thing was underwater. What a shock! And just pile the soil on both sides of it. It took 4 years to do the whole thing, which is about 350 feet long. Yeah, the only salvation of this place, it was such horrible clay and the beds were so low, and we were able to get the horse manure for nothing, so we brought in over 5,000 truckloads of horse manure over the years and just piled them right on top of the clay. So it's anywhere from a foot to 3 feet deep of pure compost. The only problem with it is it's like peat moss. When it gets dry during the summer, it becomes water repellent. And when it rains, the water just rolls right off, and it takes repeated rains in order to re-moisten it again. And another problem, when it's fresh like this, it is absolutely loaded with weed seeds. And if you use it like that, you're going to get lots of weeds coming up.
Whereas if you use it like that, the weeds have already been cooked off, so there's no weeds in it. To turn like this, it takes about 1.5 years, but if we don't have time to wait, so we just pile it on whatever we get, we have, and if weeds come up like crazy, we just have to weed the things out. Gardening is 99% hard physical labor and probably 95% weeding. And those are the things that you've got to be willing to do. I bought it to operate as a nursery. And I did operate as a nursery from 1949 to the 1950s. And at that point, I realized that no individual could own anything like this because of the tax situation. They tax you not on the basis of what the property is used for, but what it can be used for. So at that point, I was looking for a way to set this up as a public garden. And I offered it to the city, I offered it to the state, I offered it to the Metropolitan Park Board, everybody I could think of, and nobody was interested. So then I set up a nonprofit corporation and gave the whole thing to the public with the condition that it had to be used forever as a public garden. And we started out with a 75-cent admission charge, and people went right through the roof. They didn't want to pay anything to visit. Unfortunately, the local community does not really appreciate it. We have members all over Northern Ohio. We have members all over the United States. We have a couple of members in England, but very, very few members in Strongsville. The thing is that we now get people who either garden themselves or who know something about gardening, and they just rave over what they see here. With Strongsville building up the way it has, it's worth a fortune. Now, if somebody wants to come along and say, I guarantee to continue it as a public garden forever, they can have it for nothing. But if somebody wants to buy it, to convert it into a shopping center or housing development or something like that, there is not enough money in the world to buy this property. When I pass away, I'm going to be cremated and I'm going to be buried on the property. There's going to be a hole dug 3 feet deep. My ashes are going to be poured into the bottom, and it's going to be filled with concrete up to the top, so that when the bulldozer comes to bulldoze things out, they're going to hit that concrete, and that's going to be the end of the bulldozer. If there aren't enough people in this area who appreciate Gardenview enough to support it financially, there is no way that it's going to continue after I'm gone. Now, no matter what happens, it is going to continue for as long as I live. And hopefully, it's going to continue as long as Mark lives. But if it gets to the point that he is not able to find somebody to take his place, the way that I have found somebody to take my place, it's not going to be able to continue. But the way that people can help is to take an interest in it and to provide whatever financial support they can provide. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to give $1 million. I mean, million $1 contributions will add up to $1 million, just as one $1 million contribution will add up to it. But primarily, come and visit it, enjoy it, spread the word, and bring money. That's the most important thing. Without the money, this cannot continue. Now, I have never gotten a penny out of it, and I never will get a penny out of it. Every single dollar that I've ever earned has been used either for developing the grounds or has gone into the endowment. I have no need for money. Everything in the world that I want is right here. I don't want anything else. People always ask me, when are you going to retire? And I say, well, I've been retired since I was 15 years old.
I've always been crazy about an English cottage garden, which looks like something that is casual and natural and happened by itself. But that does not happen by itself. And that is the kind of a garden that requires an enormous amount of work, maintenance, money, and everything else. And that's the reason you don't see gardens like this. I was never interested in a formal garden. A formal garden is something that you put in, and once you put it in, it's finished. This kind of a garden is never finished. It's always changing, it's always growing, it's always evolving, but it's also the most interesting. I've always been interested primarily in very rare plants that you don't see anywhere else, and mostly things that are variegated, that are golden leaved, silver leaved, red leaved, all kinds of colored foliage. So that is what the gardens are made out of, and there are thousands and thousands of different things. There are bulbs and annuals and perennials and vines and shrubs and trees and evergreens and ground covers, everything you can possibly imagine. I had no money to work with, so the first pond I worked on with a pick and a shovel digging for about 1.5 years before somebody gave us some money to hire a bulldozer and have it finished. I did it all by myself until finally 14 years ago, for some mysterious reason, Mark walked in, and he's been here ever since. I used to work 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. But now that I'm 82, I can't do it anymore. I'm down to about 8 or 9 hours a day. But he cannot possibly take care of it by himself. I mean, it's almost hopeless now, 2 of us doing it, and that it will be even more beautiful than it already is, which is possible, but all of that depends upon the size of the endowment fund. If there are enough people who appreciate it enough to donate money to the endowment fund so that it will produce enough income to hire the people to continue it as it is, it will continue as it is. If not, then somehow it will have to be changed so that whatever amount of money is available will be able to take care of what is there. So I offered it to the state of Ohio, to Cuyahoga County, to the city of Cleveland, to the city of Strongsville, to everybody I could think of. It would have been a gift. The only condition was that it had to be used as a public garden forever. And the only response I got was from the city of Strongsville. They said they would be delighted to accept the gift, but no conditions. They said as soon as they took it over, they would sell it for development, and they would use the money to build a service garage, which they would name after me as a memorial to me. And they couldn't understand why I was insulted. So I set up a nonprofit corporation and gave the whole thing to the public. That gave the city officials apoplexy, because they were not collecting any taxes, no sales taxes, no real estate taxes, nothing. So for the next 10 years, they dragged me into court 8 times trying to get rid of it so that they would be able to collect taxes again. And every time, the court ruled in Gardenview's favor and against the city. So for quite a long time now, they have finally given up. They're not helping, but at least they're not trying to get rid of it anymore. I've always been crazy about plants. I've always been crazy about flowers. I've always been crazy about being away from the rat race of what's out there. All of that congestion and all of that selfishness and materialism. I don't want any of that. I want to be away from it. And this is the only place that I know of where I can be away from it. I never thought of it as a non-lucrative or non-rewarding thing. I love gardening. I wanted to spend my life gardening, and I am spending my life gardening. And the fact that it's here is a miracle. I mean, if that's not a miracle, I don't know what would be considered a miracle. People have always wanted to buy it, and my answer has always been if somebody offered all of the money in the world for this property to use for something else, the answer will always be no, thank you. I don't need the money. Everything in the world that I need and want is right here. I don't need anything else. This is what I love, and this is what I wanted, and this is what I'm doing. I mean, I don't consider it anything special. There's nothing else in the world that I would rather do. There's no place else that I would rather be.